Integrity. I've run into this a lot, like people not understanding my sense of integrity. It's quite different, not quite different, but it is different in some areas and departments than what most people consider to be integrity. So I think the most important thing to distinguish that I see many people fail to do is integrity to what, right? So when we say integrity, because our society is based around not hurting one another, because our individuals, the individuals in our society are all designed or created or conditioned to fear everything, basically, to fear uncertainty, to fear the unknown. So people by default are very afraid and protect themselves, and the majority of their desires are actually based on avoidance of pain, avoidance of discomfort, avoidance of perceived discomfort. So in a society where everyone is a time bomb waiting to explode, basically, with their own emotions, the only way to contain that on a civilization scale or in social circumstances, if we're all these time bombs that are about to emotionally explode and puke all over each other, and the only thing that keeps us contained is that you respect me and I respect you, that I don't use the wrong words or I don't make the choices that I want to make that might upset you. Mm-hmm. So you see this everywhere, right? And it's a tricky one to get rid of within your own consciousness, because especially if you care about people, which most of us do, then you have this natural sense of compassion towards everyone. That often gets mingled and intertwined very heavily with these concepts of integrity means, or respect means, that I will not trigger your lack beliefs. So I will condone myself in such a way, I will control myself, my actions, my behavior, my words, the words I use, the choices I make, the things that I desire. I will control all that so that you don't have to experience your lack beliefs, so that you don't have to explode, right? So that you can keep it all contained. So that's not my sense of integrity. And that being said, though, I've struggled greatly with crossing those boundaries when I know that my integrity is in true integrity. Integrity to what? Integrity to my soul, integrity to the greater good of all, which may not always look like keeping everybody happy on a human emotional level. It's been quite the challenge to get really comfortable in that space of not caring what people's triggers are and still loving them, but not caring. Sometimes I say, if you care about someone, you can't love them. If you love them, you can't care about them. So it's kind of like that. So when people ask about integrity, and they come from a humanized standpoint or a conditioned standpoint, oftentimes their views don't agree with me or the way that I operate. They're intimidated or they're scared by how quickly but we make changes in our lives. Because Jocelyn, when she moved in with me and got together with me, she got a lot of backlash too, understandably so, from humanity about it not being responsible and it not being honest and it not being fair and it not being in integrity. So there actually a lot of consciousness and meditation and consideration went into the choices that she made over the past couple of months. But people like to just see the outside, and they're afraid, because what happened with us when she left her partner and she got together with me, what happens to people that see that is that represents their own fears. Like, I wouldn't want that to happen to me. Like, that would be unfair to me. Mm-hmm. My time bomb of emotional lack beliefs would explode if my partner did that with me. So therefore, you're bad and you shouldn't do that. But really, all people are feeling is their own discomfort, and they're projecting that onto the situation, not knowing the details and the integrity that went into the consideration of these choices. So, yeah, integrity, to me, integrity is sort of to round it up and give it a clearer direction. Integrity means that you are intuitive, that you really sense into the depths of your being. It's the communication from your heart, from your higher self, from source, from spirit, whatever you want to symbolically attribute that wisdom to, that higher wisdom. If you learn to listen to that impulse, you will be challenged because you'll have to find ways to navigate in this world and the rules and conditions and expectations in this world this human conditioned mind-based world. When you know that your integrity is in alignment because you've meditated, you're open, you're silent, you're listening, you feel the true resonance, you become empty of self as much as you can, you're unbiased, you feel the resonance, you feel the truth, and you can even perceive all the probable realities. At some point, if you get good at this, you can start to perceive the probable realities at the different parallel timelines, and sometimes the one that benefits the most amount of people is not the one that's most appreciated by the people around you, right? So these are the integrity challenges that you'll start facing when you actually learn what integrity is, in my opinion, which is integrity to your soul, the fearlessness, the courage to, with respect and with love towards others, not out of a lack, not like trying to steal from others their joy, their happiness, their life source, so to speak, to gain more of your own. This just comes from a really heartfelt, peaceful place of alignment with yourself. But when you know that you are in that place, that's when the challenge begins, and that's when you start to know true integrity. It's when you start to walk hand in hand with your soul. It's when you start to pay attention, when you start to be unbiased by the mind's expectations. You no longer want to please other people more than you want to please your spirit, because you remember what you came here to be. You know? Integrity is remembering at all times why you're here. Mm-hmm. That would be a short definition of integrity. To always honor and remember why you are here. Why this, what's the reason, the fuel for this incarnation? If you don't have that clear, you have no sense of integrity. You're just playing this like game of morals and ethics and tiptoeing around everyone that everyone else is doing too. So, and of course, in terms of your question regarding relationships and integrity, that will show itself too in very challenging ways, where you'll have to honor this integrity in relationship changes, and you have to communicate those changes when you've made agreements with that person. So, one more thing I want to add before, if you want to share something on this, which I'm sure you did. Sure you have something to say after the last video. But one more thing I want to add to this, not make it too long, is, or was, stage is yours.
Yeah.
As I approach silence, or on a few times, I have returned from beyond the mind / nothingness in meditation, my mind recoils. Lots of fear gets brought up in my psyche. What can help me dissolve this so I can surrender more? Narayana. Well, it's going to take its time, right? You're not ready until you're ready. It's I know it's a cliche thing to say, but readiness for surrender just comes with life experience, and it happens faster for those that have a high level of discernment. So the only thing that can speed up your readiness is your degree of discernment of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, or in general, what brings happiness and what does not bring happiness. So the reason that you fear when you enter into a state of emptiness or freedom beyond the mind identity, the fear that comes up is the self-preservation mechanism inherent in the illusory mind-based self that has been created from an early age onwards to protect the sense of location, the sense of separation. So when the sense of separation, not by any danger around itself, not by any threat of being killed physically, but by the threat of meditation, is threatened in its existence of separation, and it starts to blend or merge or drop into subtle spheres of consciousness, such as nothingness and emptiness, the mind will rebound or have a surge or a blast or a purge of fear come up, and that often pulls us back out of the state of surrender, which we know ultimately we desire to merge with, right? So the reason, what can help you is to understand why you are afraid, or why the mind is afraid. It's not actually your fear. You, the true you, which you are surrendering back into, is not afraid. You know, you are what you're surrendering into. You just forgot. You just became identified with something that appears in front of that which is already the absolute background of existence. So that emptiness from which everything arises is not foreign to you. In fact, it is you right now as we speak. So it is only the mind that freaks out, first of all. The self-preservation based imposter self. So the reason it does that, again, is because you believe that happiness is to be gained through accumulating as much as you can, whether it be experience or relationship or finances or the next experience or the next experience or the next experience or 10 years from now. So you have something lined up right now. Most people have something lined up that they assume will bring them greater happiness in the future. So this is all misplacing the natural state of happiness, which is your natural state, which is what you're surrendering into, outside of themselves. Because we do that, because we've done this for so many years, when we reach into a state of emptiness, that is threatened. The mind believes that its safety, as well as its well-being or its happiness, is threatened. So if you can understand that and with great discernment observe all the things in your life that you think bring you joy, and really investigate until you see that nothing brings you joy. You are the joy, and sometimes you allow yourself to shine that forth if the circumstances line up in a way where the mind goes, oh, wait a second, this is a positive experience. And so you allow a percentage, a very small percentage, of your true God state to shine forth through the mind, and then the mind attaches that or projects that onto the object of pleasure or whatever the experience was. And it allows itself to have a glimpse of that joy. And so it calls that object or that sense perception joyful and happy. And now it's going to accumulate even more, or try to accumulate even more of those happy experiences. That's why I say you're not ready until you're ready, but you can increase the speed with which you can become ready, which you can do by discerning that happiness is never gotten out of anything. You've never become happy because of anything. You have simply aligned your perspective with a perspective that is much closer to how God would see that scenario, and so you allow the stream of joy to come through your body, and you experience that as ease and well-being and pleasure, and then you identify that again with the objects that you've gained, or the experiences that you've gained. But again, look closely and intimately at each scenario, each experience, and you'll see that you are the one that's either happy or not. You are the one that's either transparent to your natural state or closed off to it. You never get happiness from anything. Eating an apple, you don't get happiness from eating an apple. You don't get happiness from having your taste buds be stimulated. That is a projection of the mind. The more clearly you see this, the more your sense of well-being will shift from trying to be chased out there to resting in the heart and the beingness of what you are always. So the more you see that happiness is what you are, the more relaxed you become, and the more you can start to surrender into what's always already here. Because even though you may not be ready for full surrender, in essence you are, because you are it already. There's nothing new that you need to attain. You just need to give up your false ideas of what you are, that you are part of this world as you conceptualize it, that you are the mind, that you are the body, and just rest into the pure state of beingness, that intuitive godness, that isness in the heart, which has no form. It encompasses everything. It pervades everything. So again, you're attached to your happiness and the things that you think bring you happiness and safety. That's why you get afraid when you approach nothingness, because you think you're going to have to give up happiness, but actually you're about to gain it. Just want to read this quote. Like this quote perfectly, and it's from one of my favorite works ever channeled, just the love one. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. If you're familiar with my work, as I reference it quite a bit. So Ra, who is the teacher in this equation, describes the sixth density orientation towards sex. And because I've never been, in some senses, I've been like almost like the opposite of her, meaning not asexual necessarily, because definitely I can get aroused and my body can, is healthy in that way, or like can get responses just like anyone else. But when it comes to in relationships, it's always been not an obstacle, but it's been something that I haven't been too excited about, because it never felt like it flowed from the union state. It was always like it was either a means to some kind of an end. And even in the more spiritually conscious relationships that I've had, it has often been like sex has been such a focalization for reaching union. And for me, it almost feels, well, for me, it's always felt intuitively like ideally, it's an expression from that state. Because as soon as I would enter space with someone, an intimate space with someone in that way, and or with Jocelyn, like she said, several weeks ago, there would be, and if there's like a mental pressure or idea or taboo or something around this idea of sex meaning something, as soon as there's any meaning in someone's consciousness, it's going to stand out to me like a sore thumb or throat. What do you? Sore thumb.
Sore thumb.
The sore cock. It just stands out like a sore cock. And so, like, and it forms this obstacle, like this elephant, this non-physical elephant in the room for me, because it literally stands in the way. Power is given away to this concept of this entrance point called pleasure or sexual union or physical intimacy. And suddenly, so it's like we're perfect space, we're already one. Essentially, we're already one. Like we can come from the God state, right? Depending on whether you have realized or accessed the God state. So then two beings say they can access the God state and they come together, and suddenly by the act of coming together, one, or both, but in this scenario, one has an idea about sex. This describes my past relationships as well. Any idea about sex will form this focalization in this perfect space of oneness, and it will make a division that's artificial. It's not true about what that means, and the meaning that's given into that. Literally, to me, how that feels energetically is that someone's giving away all their power and connection and presence and attention and awareness, and now it's like blinded by this concept of an entrance point into that which is already here, that which we already are. So for me, ideally, sexual intimacy it's either just pleasure, like there's just a physical charge, a polarity in the energy field, there's an excitement and it wants to happen in that way. Or if it's like spiritual sex, then for me it needs to come from that state. So sex can be had, but the sex needs to be offered to that presence, to that awareness. It needs to be, not needs to be, but that's when it flows for me. Not sure if that was very clear, but this quote actually is much clearer, I think. So I won't read the whole answer to you, but the questioner asked about different density wonders, 4th, 5th, and 6th, respectively, and what such a being's perspective is on sexual intercourse. And so Ra states at some point, the 6th density, whose means of propagation you may liken to what you call fusion, is likely to refrain, meaning to abstain, to not engage with, to a great extent, from the bisexual reproductive programming of the bodily complex, and instead is more likely to seek out those with whom the sexual energy transfer is of the complete fusion nature, insofar as this is possible in manifestation in 3rd density. And the questioner asks, can you expand a little bit on what you mean by complete fusion nature? Answer, I am Ra. The entire creation is of the one creator. Thus, the division of sexual activity into simply that of the bodily complex is an artificial division. All things thusly being seen as sexual equally, the mind, the body, and the spirit, all of which are part of the polarity of the entity. Thus, sexual fusion may be seen with or without what you may call sexual intercourse, to be the complete melding of the mind, the body, and the spirit in what feels to be a constant orgasm, shall we say, of joy and delight, each in the other's beingness.
Yeah.
And that just perfectly encapsulates it for me. That's always been my desire.
And as soon as I liberated myself from this concept that sex was the ultimate state of union, it was the way that you could get the closest to someone. As soon as I gave away that back to God, it was amazing, because then I experienced that exact quote, which was, I felt like Bentinho was inside of me for like.
So could you say that what you are saying about sex could also be true of any manifested activity in which we engage in? Yes. So, and this colors my relationship with everyone that comes into my field, is even when my conscious mind has no capacity to verbalize or know, or physically, verbally, consciously, deliberately, accurately, precisely, linguistically know what their taboo or their belief systems are. I'm not always able to put it into words instantly, but I can feel that my, call it subconscious or higher conscious, I'm so in tune with that I operate from that space. I don't really operate from the conscious mind. It's just, conscious mind is an afterthought. It's a translating device for the field and the presence from which I, and beyond that, the source from which I am established. So when I meet other people using this body, I will naturally pick up on their frequencies and their belief systems, their taboos. Basically, anything that they give meaning to, they give power away to. There's no way to give power, to not give power away while you believe that something has actual meaning. Because ultimately, as soon as something has meaning, it means you're the subject and that's the object.
Yeah.
And you're a victim of that object, even if it feels totally fine, even if it feels totally spiritually, beautifully balanced. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that ultimately, from a very absolute point of view, which just happens to be my passion, any type of meaning given to anything creates subject-object duality, separation, limitation, victimization, excuses, postponement, lack of connection, all these experiences that we seek to get rid of so feverishly, and the happiness we seek, which is already the case when we simply stop proliferating all this made-up meaning, just be free of meaning. When we get used to being free, to being the truth of who we are, we no longer need to put meaning into things, no longer need to create subject-object sensations, then there is union, there is complete fusion with everyone that you encounter. Now, they might not experience it in that way. And I don't always experience it in that way on a very penetrative physical level, because the circuitry needs to be complete. There needs to be a receptivity for this fusion in order for that to be fusion. Otherwise, I'm just experiencing God on my own, so to speak, But to experience God coming forth through two expressions, recognizing that there is only God through these two expressions, is quite beautiful and special. Not to give it meaning, because ultimately it doesn't matter. But it's a more elevated experience than most people usually generate when it comes to relationship. It's more harmonious, it's more empowering, it's more truthful, closer to the truth. And so, what was it saying? Yes, so any type of manifestation that we engage in, for most people, it's filled with meaning, unconscious, subconscious, attributed meaning, and therefore disempowerment. And so to re-empower yourself is to realize yourself. It's to take your externalizing mind, power giving away, flow back and rest it all into the source of who you are. So that all this excess energy that you're just wasting every day can start to come back into itself and start to recharge itself. And source can know itself through your vehicle, through your reflection, through the mind, which is a mirror of God.
Because there's two different forms.
Do you still visualize to manifest things anymore? I don't really. Well, it happens naturally sometimes, because it's context-based. So if there's a relevant situation that arises and the imagination is activated, there will be visualization happening. But I'm not, sitting down to do that. The only reason I even did that, and I never really fully, truly actually did that stuff. It was more...
I did.
Yeah, good. She did. I mean, of course, I've tried it out. I've done it. I've used it. But I was teaching it for the sake of that there's so many people that want this information, and that this is what they're struggling with, and that this is the level of consciousness that they're interested in at this point. It's never been my native passion. It's never been my true desire. It's never been my true state and how we operate. But it's very helpful for a lot of people, and so I engaged in those practices, or at least teaching those practices, and to an extent using them, of course, to make sure that what I was teaching works. I used that for several years, the past 4 years or so, 3 years, to be able to distill this empowerment path and law of attraction and negative belief systems and all that stuff. But yeah, I find happiness is here,
God.
And think about it. Why are you visualizing what you're visualizing? Is it not to gain happiness? And so why not visualize happiness? Which the most profound way for me to do that is to consider or to contemplate or to be immersed in the reflection of the mind, or you could call it a thought or contemplation, that I am God, I am all, I am source. So in a sense, you could say it's the same thing. If you're visualizing a yacht and you want the yacht, I'm doing the same thing, except I'm skipping the yacht. I'm just going straight to what you actually want, which is happiness and union. So again, discernment will help you get clear on what you actually want. The things we think we want is not what we actually want ultimately. Doesn't mean we should suppress these desires. And someone asked, when you are in that state of union, able to be in that state of union, will you attract someone that's able to meet you there? And yes, if that's part of what's truly relevant for you and what's part of your truer desires, then you will absolutely do that. Bentinho says that there is no such thing as angels. I don't think I've ever said that. But again, so when you create the experience of pain, when you choose to choose pain, how are you going to benefit that experience? How are you going to benefit that dream scenario inside of your consciousness? Whereas if you can stay in bliss by realizing that ultimately this is all a shared dream and consciousness is completely fine, now you have a stability, you have a clarity to be intuitive from, and so action can naturally come through you without you having to feel responsible for the act and the outcome of the situation. You're just allowing your body to be part of the canvas of that situation in your act, and you're allowing it all to be part of God. And by having no resistance to it, you can be in bliss, and from that bliss, doesn't mean you don't also feel emotion when you witness something like that, depending on what thoughts come up in your mind. Doesn't mean you're no longer empathic or that your field doesn't pick up on other energies anymore. It just means that you, which is not your field, you're not your field, you're not your emotions, you're not your feelings, you're not your thoughts. That you can be in bliss, can be in its true anchored state. It can be unaffected. It allows for its vehicles to move in harmony and flow with the dance of intelligence, which is animating of the dreamscape anyway. So now you can allow it to happen instead of make it all about you. Because when you make it all about them, you actually make it all about you. So, because you're ultimately expressing itself in all these ways that it is doing, if you don't recognize God in the and you are feeling the pain even when you're trying to help, doesn't mean you can make a difference still, even the diluted state. But ultimately what you want is in the bliss, the trust and the communion with God, while allowing you to feel this empathy and compassion and allow infinite arms or your speech in the way that is required in that scenario. And if you stay conscious of the inner bliss, if you stay conscious of God within all things, while you are present in such a dreamscape scenario of seeming reality and pain and suffering, you'll have this overview that is not yours. It won't be you. You won't be thinking about the situation. You won't be thinking what to do. There's this overview, and just naturally, infinite intelligence will move your vehicle. So you're going to be far more efficient. So if your desire truly is to be of service, it is your responsibility to be at bliss in war. It is your responsibility to feel blissful in the face of other people's pain. If you are serious about service to others, if you say you are serious about service to others, but you end up going into that pain over and over and over again, then it's all about you. So even though your intentions think that they are well-intentioned, and they are ultimately, if you truly care about the other person's well-being, you want the most efficient approach to come through you, right? So you need to access infinite intelligence, that flow of infinite intelligence. The way to do that is to surrender, to recognize God and goodness in all things. and therefore to access bliss. So ironically, it's the package deal. It's the complete kit. When you're in bliss, you are intelligent, you are efficient, you are in harmony with all things, you are selfless naturally, you are happy. So your happiness actually contains the highest benefit for all situations. Your pain does not, because it contracts you, it limits you, it limits the amount of infinite intelligence that can come through you, and you think that it's all up to your brainwaves to figure out what to do in that scenario. So can you stay in surrender? Can you stay in God? Can you stay intoxicated with bliss while you walk into such a scenario? Doesn't mean you can't act or show compassion if that's relevant. But it means that inwardly, you still know that all is perfect and that God is. So if you really care about them, you're going to be happy in nasty situations. Okay? And people often think the opposite. Like, if you're happy, and again, doesn't mean that you have to start like laughing, in a situation where that's not appropriate. But again, infinite intelligence will take care of that. Sometimes you are supposed to laugh to crack or burst a bubble, but it will happen of its own accord without you having any control over it. People will think it's you doing it, but it's not, because you've withdrawn. You're in the God state. You see all as God. And so naturally your body will either laugh, but usually it will respect the situation, and it will be able to show a certain calmness or even emotionality or compassion towards that situation. But again, it's the intelligence doing this. It's not your personal pain. It is completely conjured up in context to that scenario from a harmonious intelligence that governs all things. So if you really care, again, you need to be in bliss as much as you can. That's the only way to be of service. If you're not happy, you're not helping.
That one, yeah. You don't have to answer it.
Ben, do you desire to be a father? Only of all you guys at the body. So I highly recommend every single person listening to this to consider if the location that you live in is out of your own free choice, or are you just reacting to the past? Are you just reacting to your job being there? Are you reacting to the lacks and needs that you think you need to accomplish by being there? Do you actually want to live in the location with your body, in the location that you are living in today? If not, get the fuck out of there. Find a place that resonates. Find a place that makes you feel nourished and that inundates you with inspiration and connection, and where the right people show up for you and things accelerate in a positive way. And your stuff comes up, usually initially. When people come to Sedona, usually for about 2 weeks, they're flustered. Some thrive really well on it, but most people, their stuff will come up. And Sedona just won't. It's kind of like Shiva. It won't let you get away with anything.
No.
Things that you can get away with in a city or some other place, you're not going to get away with. You're going to be faced with it. That's beautiful. It's just a purging that happens. And it's a great gift to yourself to do that. So that would be my summarized take on that kind of stuff. And Sedona is gorgeous and awesome, and the community that's forming here is amazing. So as far as relative experiences go, come check out Sedona. I recommend it. It's very nourishing spiritually. Again, we have this community going. I give 2 meetings a week here. We're expanding things, so it'll be fun for you to drop in here and say hi to the community and hang out and be part of the teachings and the meditation. Can you tell something more about the end of individuality? Is its absolute dissolution possible from third density? Yes, it is extremely rare, and but I do believe it is possible. And its absolute dissolution is something that I'm personally is a yearning that has pervaded my experience for the past 6 to 10 years. And because of whatever kind of reasons, you can call them excuses too, but soul reasons, template reasons, bodhisattvic reasons for being here, I haven't done the complete dissolution yet. But it is gradually getting closer and closer and closer, and I can feel this threshold coming where I won't have to be who I am anymore for mankind. The thing is, if I were to be completely dissolved, and I have had those experiences, those states, just not permanently, so I know what it's like, just not permanently. And so I find myself approximating it during everyday life, during the things that I'm doing, and sometimes being there completely. But from that state, I wouldn't be the person that I am in certain situations that help me. Even this live stream, like this amount of talking and speaking, it is unlikely that this would be occurring. So I'm stepping myself down deliberately to be able to do this kind of stuff and to be able to meet people where they're at. When that job is done, when the threshold and the amount of work and the proliferation threshold of my work and the structures that we're putting into place and the basic foundational teachings, when that passes a certain threshold of exposure and the ball is rolling past a certain point, and I feel that it's coming, and I told Jocelyn this just yesterday. Mm-hmm. It might be a matter of days, it might be a matter of a few years, I don't know for sure. But I feel it coming closer and closer, which every time it comes closer, it gives me more permission to dissolve more. So it is possible, but it is very rare. It's extremely rare, actually. You can probably count the people on Earth, even combining all indigenous populations and yogis in Tibet, you can probably count them on one set of hands, possibly two. So, yeah, it is very rare. Because it's not the same as the mind dissolving. In a sense, it is. But it's not the same as the personal sense of ego dissolving. I haven't had a solid ego for years, but I've used the ego effect, and I have had egoic experiences since the solid ego dropped away. But what we're talking about, complete or absolute dissolution, is where the actual individual soul, while incarnate in third density, when the soul is sixth density, realizes its absolute union with all that is. And so it starts to dissolve the very soul, not just the ego within this life, but the ego beyond this life also starts to dissolve. Now, that's, like I said, is very rare, but it is possible, I believe. And well, I'll find out at some point whether it is or not when the time is right, and I can retire and be of service through my retirement. But I won't be required, or I won't feel like I'm required to be doing the things that I'm doing or representing the things that I'm representing at this point. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
No. Mm. Mm-hmm.
So let's step it down again a little bit and tell you of the events that we have going on. Use the power of environment and community and teachings and structure to your advantage. So you're not, I meet so many people that they live in like a busy, crowded city, and there's like 60 people that live, if you live in a flat New York or something, there's like 60 people within a 100-foot radius of your body at all times. I'm exaggerating, but and there's like, when I check my phone in New York City, there's like a list of 128 different Wi-Fi stations to connect to. It's insane. So if you live in that kind of scenario, some people genuinely thrive in that scenario. It's genuinely relevant for where they're at and what they're doing. But for a lot of people, it is complete and utter auric infringement. If you don't have that space of nature, if you don't have that space of high frequency, if you don't have that environment, that community, that teaching, that structure, you're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to really deepening your level of consciousness and expanding and accelerating and becoming more of who you are here to be. You're fighting an uphill battle. So